Hello there, welcome back to the channel and I hope today's going well. I'm Jedi Master and today we're going to be looking at the final form of Lightsaber Combat, a bonus form, Form 8. This will be the final installment of the 7 Forms of Lightsaber Combat playlist, so let's get right into it. So Form 8 was known as Vaapad, and it was actually a subvert of Form 7. It was a bit of a mix of Form 7 that was created to kind of adapt Form 7 in a way to make it a little bit more on the light side. And the form was made by Mace Windu and Sora Bulk, both of which Jedi Masters by this point, and they kind of made this form different. Form 8, Vaapad, channeled your inner darkness, but turned it into a more positive way. You'd walk on the line between light and dark. You'd relinquish the fact of winning. You'd like the satisfaction of the duel and winning it, and you'd pretty much accept that darkness within you. Because you're accepting it, you're using it for, in a sense, a good cause, and you're not really giving into it. You're also redirecting your opponent's darkness against them, meaning you're turning, their darkness against them. You're using yours, but in a good way because you're accepting it, you're understanding it, and it's really on the thin line between light and dark, which meant that the form itself was a bit of a questionable one, and Mace Windu himself, after defeating Sora Bulk, fell to the hands of Dooku and pretty much became Dooku's apprentice and fought Mace Windu, and apparently said he perfected the form, he didn't, and lost the duel. Well, the duel actually ended in a stalemate, and I'll get to why. But after that, Mace Windu decided that this form would not be taught unless he gave his own permission, because there was such a high possibility that you could fall to the dark side whilst learning this form and whilst using it. Now, as always, the form itself has advantages and disadvantages. In this case, Form 8 Vaapad has actually a ton of advantages. The main one is, it's very quick and it's actually very unpredictable, like with Form 1. When you look at it from a broad sense, it doesn't look very connected. The attacks look unpredictable, they're not connected, they maybe look so neat, but they're very quick and agile, and they are connected in a sense, and it looks more like just a bunch of whirling blades. Anakin himself described the form when he was watching Dooku vs Sidious as just an absolute orb of purple. You couldn't track the motion, meaning that it was very difficult to block, counter, and it was just so unpredictable in a sense. It didn't seem very connected, even though they were connected in a way to make them look very difficult to track. And yeah, they were just very agile. They were just absolutely brilliant. You couldn't track this. Had that sense of unpredictability, which is something you really want in dueling. You want to be unpredictable. You don't want them to realise, oh, they can do this now and they can do this. You really want to change it up. And this form was great. It just looked like an absolute whirlwind of blades, which meant that this form was very, very good because it looked so unconnected, that it just meant that it had that unpredictability. The bad thing about this form, its weakness, which was why Sora Bulk and Windu ended in stalemate when they duelled, was because it didn't use any force abilities in a sense. There was no use of force abilities in this duel. They were almost non-existent, meaning when Sora Bulk and Mace fought, they both knew this form. They both created it. So it ended as a stalemate, and because they weren't using their force abilities, they kind of knew in a sense what they were doing, and it just didn't work. And the reason why force abilities are so important when we look at a dueling aspect is they're very useful. A force push is brilliant. As we know from Niman, one of their key moves is /force push or /force grip. And that really creates a whole different sense, as it means another way to winning. Without having those force abilities in there, it becomes so different, it becomes so lifeless, so lifelast, and you lose a key aspect in these duels. Now, as always, there are notable people. In this case, obviously, Mace Windu, as I've talked about, he was the main creator of this form, alongside Sora Bulk. I will make a separate video on Sora Bulk because he's actually quite an interesting character. But Mace was the main practitioner of this form. He knew it off by heart, and whenever he duelled people, this was what he was using. Against Sidious, he really tapped into this form, even though, as I said, it's very close between light and dark. Mace was able to channel his inner darkness and use it against Sidious. He accepted it. He accepted Mace Windu's fury, which this form was all about. It was not just a lightsaber form, but it was also a combat and fighting style. Accepting your opponent's fury. And was able to use that and redirect that against Sidious, like with blocking blaster bolts. Other practitioners of this form were Depa Bilaba, and that is, Mace Windu's apprentice. She was the apprentice of Mace Windu, and we saw her in the Clone Wars Season 7, and also in the Bad Batch. She was the master of Caleb Dume, Kanan Jarrus. And another practitioner that may surprise you was Quinlan Vos. Mace did teach Quinlan Vos, but he was a bit hesitant about it, because Quinlan Vos is a very, troublesome person, very troublesome Jedi. But Quinlan Vos did use this lightsaber form. All in all, in a quick recap, Form 8 was very fast. It didn't look very connected when strikes. It looked like just a whirlwind of blades, meaning it had that unpredictability use, and it was very good in a dueling sense, and it was almost designed for dueling. It also meant that you would use your inner emotions and your inner dark side, but you'd accept the fact that it was there, and you'd redirect your opponent's fury and dark side against them to then pretty much take them out. And, because you're accepting that, you're using that dark side power, but, you're using it in a right way. You're using it in a good way, and you're using it against your opponent. That really is the best way to describe this form. It's very complicated, and I really hope that this video has helped to break down how you use the penumbra of the dark side against your opponent, and you're tapping into your dark side emotions, but using it against your opponent, redirecting them to your opponent, accepting they're there, and using them, but not going over the edge. You're walking on that very thin line between light and dark. But anyway, guys, I do hope you enjoyed the 7 Forms of Lightsaber Combat playlist. I have very much enjoyed making it. There's one final thing I'm going to cover, and it's not form, but in that video we're going to cover Sin Dralig, one of my favourite Jedi Masters, and he was the Jedi Battle Master. So stay tuned for that, and may the Force be with you.